So there's so much more about the moon missions, which just stinks. And we could do an entire program about this. You could do a massive amount of programs about this. But I mean, there's the fact that we mentioned the lunar module. The engine had only been tested once in space, and that was not with a landing. That was actually above the moon. So it never. They didn't take an unmanned. They didn't do an unmanned drone test, which is what you do with every aircraft. I mean, you build models of it first. You put it through a wind tunnel. You know, but there was this drive to get the job done before the end of the decade. However, it's reckless to rush a job with something like that, which could result in men getting killed.
Exactly.
And it's funny enough, there's a guy who actually believes the moon landings were real. I've interacted with him online. He sent me some information about which someone managed to get from NASA through the Freedom of Information Act. This was kept confidential at the time. It's not top secret. It was a confidential document and a memo, a policy memo for NASA and the Apollo mission. It said basically that there was no guarantee. Once the lunar module for Apollo 11 landed on the moon, they weren't entirely sure whether the ascent engine would work. It was it was used something called a hypergolic rocket engine. It didn't have a spark plug. They would just mix two chemicals together, and these would then ignite spontaneously. But it was a type of engine that was known to be. It was not used very often. It's been used since then on the space shuttle and things like that. But there was something a bit iffy about it back then. And imagine it would happen. This document went through. It's very, very sobering to read it, and very, very grim. It's a very, very grim thing to read, because they basically said that if the astronauts, they finished walking on the moon, they got back in the ascent stage, pressed the button, nothing happened, and the ascent engine failed, and there's no way you can really repair it, and there's absolutely no hope of rescue of getting it. There's absolutely no hope of rescue. The guys had a limited air supply on the moon with them, which would they only had enough for about a day or two. And so in that eventuality, what they would do is Mission Control would immediately cut all communications with the moon, or the astronauts on the moon. They would just shut down all the radio and everything, because those men were doomed. Now, what this document also said was the astronaut did have with them cyanide capsules, like little pills that they could take if the option was there, that they could then swallow these pills and have a painless death rather than just suffocate. But they would shut off all communication with the base, with the actual Tranquility base, the actual landing site. And the thought that that was actually going through the heads of people at NASA. They would then have to, of course, one thing they couldn't do is then cut off all contact with the media and the publicity and all the millions and what was it, 2.5 billion people all over the world who were watching, because this was watched everywhere, and everything was put on hold for it. Even in Vietnam, in like the North Vietnam, which was engaged in a bitter war, they still had it. They were still watching it and really, really cheering on the astronauts. You know? It was about the only time the whole world sort of been united. And they said, "I'm sorry, but I'm afraid those guys are dead. We couldn't bring them back."
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, the answer that what the NASA proponents say is, well, they were really lucky, weren't they? They did manage to get all the astronauts back. Weren't they lucky? But it's easy to say that afterwards.
Yeah.
What about beforehand? So the incentive was there to fake it. And there's one more thing is that no one's been back, right? The last manned mission to the moon took off at the end of 1972. It was Apollo 17. Since then, no human feet have walked on the moon. They've sent probes. They said there's been one soft landing, which was the Chinese Jade Rabbit rover, which was a couple of years ago. And that's the only soft landing they've had on the moon since then. So any science fiction and space fan from the 1960s who could look forward in time to the present day would gasp in dismay at how little progress has been made, how much was predicted in science fiction, and by space experts too, and how much they were looking forward to it. And then we come forward to 2018. No, we've still not gone beyond low Earth orbit. Sorry, there's no cities on Mars, which is what everyone was predicting. So, and there's a guy called Phil Couch who's actually been writing about this. Well, how come they can't send people back? Because NASA are now quibbling. They're saying, oh well, we're not sure exactly how we're going to get people back to the moon. Right. So what? You got within 10 years, within 8 years actually. You put a man on the moon. You put 2 men on the moon within 8 years of Kennedy setting that challenge.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
You know, with all the political pressure, without all that, with no political pressure today, with 21st century technology, you say you can't do it. So basically, the moon is another thing that I'm very suspicious of, the moon landing, and that got me into a lot of other things. That got me reading conspiratorial literature, you know, and then Hapanwa was born, Hospital Porters Against the New World Order.
Yes.
I started that in 2006,
Right.
and just as the website, the original website, which has expanded from then. But yeah, it's people say, well, why did you say that? Because I was a hospital porter for 23 years.
Yeah.
23 years I was hospital portering, and I came across a guy called Jack McLam. He's died now, actually, but he was an American who had something called Police Against the New World Order.
Right.
I thought, what's good for police? It's good for hospital porters. So I said,
Yeah.
so Hapanwa was born, and so it's expanded from there.
Okay.
What did your other fellow workers think of you, with the alternative knowledge you was looking at and these conspiracy theories? Were they supported? Did they make fun? Because sometimes they tend to
Yeah, they did.
dismiss and just you know, oh, you're a bit, you know.
It was quite a mixed reaction, actually, because I was
Yeah,
very
yeah.
outspoken. I mean, probably maybe a bit excessively so, but I was very outspoken, and I did tell people what I thought. And usually, I'd just wait for them to ask me, because very often they would ask me, but I wouldn't necessarily volunteer information. But yeah, I mean, it was a mixed response, but some were very, very open to it. Some were very, very sort of. There's a couple of people I'm still in touch with from the hospital who have really kind of. I think I sort of like was very influential on them.
Right.
And so they're kind of on this level now because of what I did, which is great.
That's good news,
I'm really
yeah.
pleased. I'm very pleased. Makes me feel good that I help people like that.
Yeah.
That's the objective, isn't
That
it?
is. That's what you know.
This
That's
is
what,
why we're doing this. you know.
Exactly. We're
Yeah.
doing the same thing. That's the same reason.
Yeah, so I mean, we're just, I suppose, at the beginning of our journey of learning. So we want to bring in people who have the knowledge, like yourself and like Andrew. So this is why we interview people like yourself. You know.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing we're doing, because this is an information
Exactly,
war.
yes.
So
It
you're
is.
doing a good job. It
Yes.
all adds up, and this is an information war. I mean, it's about knowledge, and knowledge is what is basically what will set the world free, because it's about how many people know the truth.
Yeah.
The truth will set you free, as it says in the Bible, which is true. Because it's when you reach a critical mass of knowledge, then things inevitably get better. Things inevitably change.
Yeah.
It's the whole power structure. All the power structures of the world today are built on an edifice of secrecy, of lies, and as George Orwell said, to tell the truth is a revolutionary act, because it's that which breaks through that edifice.
Yeah.
It is that one thing that will bring it down. You can't. It's not an enemy that we can shoot or hit with a sword or a club or any kind of physical weapon. That enemy, the enemy is of a totally different type. It's more an enemy inside our own heads, inside the heads of the people.
You've got to get to a certain conscious level, haven't you? Really,
Yes.
To see it and kind of take it on, so to speak, you know, encompass
Definitely.
it, you know.
The enemy doesn't wield physical weapons.
No,
It wields lies and psychological manipulation and deception, false flag terrorism, UFO cover-ups, things like that. If UFOs come down to, sometimes UFOs crash to the Earth, and they cover that up. That's an example of the kind of
exactly.
this is the engagement of this war we're fighting. That's how it consists
I
of.
mean, even within our family, even within the truth movement, there's a lot of people who, you know, are really on side with the 9/11 and the political side, but go nowhere near the UFO and alien.
that's
Nowhere
right.
near it. And it's almost like it's purposely been psychologically separate, but it's not. It's completely linked.
They are
completely
linked.
linked.
They are linked, and
And-
it's
and I think it's been created where you think it's separate or it's not. It doesn't engage this, but it does. You know.
Well, it's quite frustrating actually, and
It
quite
is,
sad
yeah,
because
yeah.
I mentioned earlier that I've been involved in the 9/11 Truth Group in Oxford, which is now disbanded basically. But I was involved in this 9/11 Truth Group here in Oxford. I was connected to the general 9/11 Truth campaign, which is still going today. But I have nothing to do with it. Andrew's sort of been kicked out of it, really. I sometimes go to their meetings, but I've not been formally expelled like Andrew has. But I'm sure it's only a matter of time. But no, but they said, I actually did a presentation for one of them once, and they just said the guy who ran it, who was this he was not someone I particularly liked. What was his name? I can't remember what his name was. But he just said, look, Ben, stick to the subject, right? Because I know you've got ideas about UFOs and things like that, right? But please don't wander off topic. Don't volunteer any information about anything. Just stick to the 9/11 subject when you're doing this presentation. And I said, look, cool. Well, that's what I was going to do anyway. But he basically said he didn't want me bringing UFOs into it because it will make us look crazy. He says he didn't want the 9/11 truth associated with ufology because it would make it look crazy. But there's a chap called Bryce Zabel. He's really into UFOs. He has written books on them. He actually was a screenwriter a Hollywood screenwriter, and he created the series Dark Skies, the TV series, which is a really good TV series about alien invasion and things like that, and Roswell's and stuff. He wrote an article called "UFOs and 9/11 Truth Don't Mix," and he said that people in ufology should not get involved with 9/11 Truth, and certainly not bring 9/11 Truth into it, for the very same reason as the guy in the 9/11 Truth movement I knew said. He said he didn't want it to be associated with 9/11 Truth because it would make UFOs look crazy. Ufology would look crazy. So these two characters are very similar. They're from opposite sides, but they reject the other for the same reason.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter, as you've just said, is these two phenomena are intimately linked.
Yes, yeah.
Through various different ways, maybe through the energy situation, because
again, if you talk about Judy Wood in a lot of 9/11 truth movement kind of organisations, they don't want to know.
I know. It's all in the storyline of these books. I explore it all in the storyline of these books.
Okay.
It's in fictional form. I go into this in great detail. But basically, there's several different ways in which these things are connected. One of them is that now Dr. Judy Wood says that the government got the technology for their weapon, which they used to destroy the World Trade Center, from a guy called John Hutchison, which is very possible. She calls it the Hutchison effect.
Yeah.
And indeed, there was a chap called Colonel John Alexander, who is basically, for some reason, he does the UFO conference circuit, and he's invited to various conspiracy conferences and UFO conferences. I honestly don't know why, because I don't think he's trustworthy enough. But he actually went to Canada and he spent time with John Hutchison. John Hutchison was doing these experiments with electromagnetic interference and generating this energy. And he observed him for a couple of months. Now, the skeptics say John Hutchison is a fraud. Well, Colonel John Alexander who worked for the Advanced Research Project Agency, today it's called DARPA, in 1982, he spent, Andrew's probably talked to you about this, but it was a number of months observing Hutchison. So obviously he wasn't learning magic tricks, an illusion. And then he took that back, and it's quite likely that that's where the source of the weapon came from. But it also might be to do with the fact that there were several sources for this kind of energy, which has been weaponized. There's people like Nikola Tesla. Now it goes back a long way, this cover-up. Because Nikola Tesla's, the cover-up, I traced it back to the late 19th century, at least, when the world wasn't even using oil, it was using coal as the main fossil fuel. For the first half of the Industrial Revolution. Well, the second half was oil, but it was the age of coal that came first. And they were suppressing the work of Tesla from at least the 1890s. And of course, when Tesla died, he was basically, there was a massive cover-up of all his work. But so a lot of it came from human sources. But at the same time, you have extraterrestrial craft. Now, sometimes these things do come to grief on the Earth's surface, and they are secretly salvaged by the government, and the government then will deny anything happened. The most famous of these is in July 1947, the Roswell incident, which is why this is called Roswell Rising. Basically, the story begins with the Roswell incident in this fictional scenario.
Right.
Now that was an event in which a craft from an object, an artifact from another world, came down on the Earth's surface, and the government, they sealed off the area, they salvaged all the evidence, and then they said, what they salvaged was the wreckage. Some people said they had bodies of aliens. And they said, oh, it's just a weather balloon. And they've changed, the thing is, they've changed their stories several times, the government. They have changed their story. They've said, first they said it was a weather balloon. No, it was part of an electronic espionage operation called Project Mogul. And that was the cover-up, you see. That's what they were covering up. But then, you see, Project Mogul wasn't declassified till the 1990s, and I can't help wondering if this was just a deeper level of the cover-up, and I think it is. The real cover-up was there was this extraterrestrial craft, and they maintain that illusion to this day. Now, what's not very well known, I mean, the Roswell incident has a fairly wide mainstream acceptance. A lot of people know about it, thanks to various authors such as Charles Berlitz and people like that, and Stanton Friedman. And there's been several films made with this theme of the Roswell incident. Several books have come out. I first heard about the Roswell incident in a book called, I think it was the Doomsday Conspiracy, but it was by Sidney Sheldon, who's a very well-known writer, and is a very interesting writer too. But it's not the only one. It's one of several. We don't know exactly how many, and there's a guy who's written a book listing these various, what he calls crash retrievals, which is what they become known as. And he lists over 100 during the course of the 20th century. Average is one per year. But I know that there are, I don't know if all of those are real, but if even a fraction of them are real, it means that this is happening. It's happened more than once. For example, I mean, I have good reason to believe there was an incident in 1987 near Nottingham, not far from where you guys come from. It was in Sutton-in-Ashfield, or the area around Ashfield.
Near Mansfield, was it?
Near Mansfield,
Yeah.
Now, you may have heard about the Mansfield incident. The explosion, there was an explosion of those lights in the sky. And that was covered by the mainstream media.
I think you looked into that, didn't you?
I did.
No, yes.
I actually had there's a local researcher, a guy called Nigel Crowley, who's been looking at this, and I made a film featuring Nigel. Excuse me. Excuse me. But there's been a couple of, I teamed up with local researchers, Daniel Bostock, Nigel Crowley, and we explored the area, and we did come up with some very interesting evidence which suggests that there was a crash retrieval in that area, including that the area, large areas were sealed off by there was a military presence in the area, the police were there, roadblocks, and there's another guy I met actually who remembers that the main road between Nottingham and Mansfield is the A420. That was actually closed for about a week, and it would cause absolute chaos because that's the main thoroughfare between those two large settlements. And all the traffic between Nottingham and Mansfield had to go around these small lanes, these small country lanes, and they were just gridlocked for about a week, because that was where the diversion was. And this guy called Andy, he remembered that. He remembered that happening. So this happened at the same time as the explosions and the lights in the sky. Now, why would you shut that road? How could that road be shut for a week?
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't not roadworks. What? So that I think leads credence to the idea that there was a crash retrieval of a UFO in that area in 1987.
So it crashed and it remained crashed. It didn't crash and then take it. It was
It
actually.
did. No, it came down. It came down at Thieves Wood.
Yeah.
Which is between Nottingham and Mansfield, and the area where it came down was actually cleared of trees, and to this day you can still see where it is because there's only small trees there, and bushes and things like that. Then it came down at Annesley Hall, stately home, in the grounds of Annesley Hall, and that was where the actual craft came down to rest, and that area was sealed off too. So there were two cordons.
So the military came in and retrieved the craft, and that was it. Yeah.
What's interesting is they responded very quickly. Now this happened with the Bear Mountains incident too, in 1974, because Nigel remembers this. He was he was living in the area. He's a native to the area. So's Dan Bostock. And they both say they remember things like the water being... Now, Dan remembers the water being cut off. He was just a kid at the time. He remembers that they were actually... there was snow there, and he was shoveling snow into the bathtub and using that to wash and things like that. And there was no electricity, and there was bowsers of water for people to drink. And there was a local insurance company that was actually inundated with claims. And a local TV repair shop was like, all the TVs broke down and things like that, and they couldn't keep up with the demand. And but they remember things like they remember things like helicopters overhead within 45 minutes. And he said that they came from RAF Cranwell and RAF Coningsby. That's what they did. He said they came from. But the actual contingent at those bases normally don't include that number of aircraft or those kinds of aircraft, which means, because there were troop carriers, Chinooks, the big twin rotor plane, and which means that the government had already deployed forces forward into the general area where this was going to happen, as if they knew it was going to happen. They didn't know the exact spot where this thing would come down, but they knew roughly where it was going to be, so they could actually get a response force there in the area, so they could then go in as soon as the thing came down. And another example, it's possible maybe they have some space tracking system or something, and they knew it was they were actually tracking it as it was flying through the atmosphere. Maybe that's how they knew. Maybe they had like a day's notice or something, because they saw it coming down, so they had about 24 hours notice. See, same thing with Berwyn Mountains. You see the camp was actually set up at Llangollen, which is just up the valley from Llandrillo, which is where this happened. And so then, as soon as it happened, the lorries were seen. All army lorries were seen on the road, just driving in a large number towards Cadair Berwyn and Cadair Bronwyn, these two mountains where this craft came down.
Really? I've not heard that one.
That was January 1974. Now that was a very interesting case. Now Richard E. Hall's investigated this in detail.
Oh, right. Okay.
But this is where a UFO came down. Now, it came down in a very remote area, high up in the Berwyn Mountains in northeast Wales. There's a large object which did take off again. It came down, but it took off again. But there was a government response to that. It doesn't look like there was any crash. Nothing crashed, but there was an object there, and it was witnessed by several people. There was a local nurse was actually driving through the area, and she saw this spherical glowing object. And well, she spoke out for a while, but she's gone quiet now. So she's left the country, and no one can seem to find her. She's living abroad, and she doesn't speak to the media. But obviously, it's a very, very different environment to the area around Nottingham, because there's the area that they call it the Nottingham conurbation. There are a large number of large towns and fields and forests and things like that. It's like Sutton in Ashfield, like Blyth, like these other places. And if you can cover up a UFO crashing there, is there any way you can't cover one up? If you control flows of information and you control the ability to, firstly, to make the evidence disappear, put out a cover story in all the papers and all the TVs and everything, where can't you cover one up? Do you know what I mean?
I mean, even, was it Phoenix, wasn't it? And thousands of people saw the UFO, didn't they? And still, they managed to...
They did, yeah.
It's unreal, really, you know.
Yeah.
It's that was a city of 1 million people, the size of Birmingham, and it's this chevron-shaped object flew over the top of it, and they showed a brief, they showed a very poor image of this craft. They said, "Oh, it's just flares from training craft." But Governor Fife Symington of Arizona, he actually has confessed. He said it was all nonsense. He said there was a load of rubbish. There was a real alien craft there, and I saw it. I pretended otherwise because I didn't want to create mass panic, public panic. And so the question has to be, he confessed, but how many others haven't?
Yeah, and in those confessed, why that in the public domain?
Yeah.
You know, as big as it should be. You know, that should be. That's
big.
That's disclosure, in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hardly been touched. I mean, he came forward and confessed. I know it was a few years later, but it's hardly been touched by the mainstream media. The mainstream media were happy to trumpet out the cover story. And just not interested at all in the truth, which is a shame.
Well, that's what we've come to expect almost now, isn't it? out the deal.
Yeah, so it's like another thing that I'm thinking of as well in my head as well. It's like Ronald Reagan. He once did a speech to the United Nations or something, saying, "Haven't we got extra presents around us already?" Or something was to that effect. You know, as if because he wants to like bring ET home type thing almost, but he said ET's already here. That's what
It was funny, yeah. He was kind of like it's a weird speech because I mean Ronald Reagan, you see, was he was president of the United States, but it's quite obvious he wasn't the man in charge because he was an actor. He used to be an actor. It's quite clear that he had
more ways than one. Yeah.
He had a few bats in the belfry, yeah. Even, I mean, of course, he eventually was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. But I mean, even back then, I mean, you could see that. I mean, he was the second oldest U.S. president in history. Trump is the oldest. So it's pretty clear he had the vapors even back then, and because all he had to do was read the auto cue. Somebody else was in charge, probably George Bush as vice president. But he made this speech. He did it twice actually, and he said what he was part of this end of Cold War agenda along with Gorbachev.
Star Wars project.
Well, the Star Wars project was interesting, because that brings us into the weaponization of space and the secret space program. And there's something very recent actually connected with that. I want to go into maybe if we've got time. But Reagan, you see, was very interesting because the Cold War dominated global politics since the end of World War II. And come the mid-1980s, they don't elect, but a man who was chosen to be Soviet premier, Mikhail Gorbachev, he was the first one that didn't look like like some secretive, miserable git who'd just come back from a funeral. He was a smiling man. He was affable. He was friendly. He was nice. It was. I compared him to say like Stalin and the other one, Brezhnev, and all these others who were like really, really nothing. It was nothing like that. And he got on very well with. He became good friends with Reagan. He became good friends with Margaret Thatcher. He turned up at her funeral. Because and so it was obvious then that the Cold War would come to an end. No one, I don't think they intended the Soviet Union to collapse, perhaps, but it did. But they definitely intended the Cold War to come to an end. And I remember that it turned out that Gorbachev was a member of the Rockefeller Foundation, and that there's a document from I think the late 1970s, date from the late 1970s, that say, "Oh, the Cold War's really had it doesn't serve our purposes anymore for world control." Because of course there is a covert world government, and the two sides of the Cold War were just extensions of that. And they said it doesn't serve our purposes anymore, so we're going to change it. We're going to change the scenario. And so of course Reagan then says, then he makes this statement about extraterrestrial life. He said, if we were facing a threat from beyond our world, think how quickly our differences would.
Remember that speech?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to refer to.
And that's when he says, I ask, is there not an alien presence already among us?
That's the one.
But then he says straight afterwards, what could be more alien to human aspirations than war and things like that? And I think to myself, that's an odd way to put it. I mean, maybe he was just reading from the wrong speech or something, and they suddenly switched. We got the wrong one on there, or something like that. I mean, you know what I mean? But I mean, what's funny is that just about 10 years later, a film came out called Independence Day, and it's very, very, very interesting. Well, it was a pretty poor film actually in terms of its. Intellectual content and its technical content, it was a very, very poor movie. It was badly written, bad acting, stupid plot lines, excellent special effects. That's all you can say about it. But they brought a sequel out actually by the same director, Roland Emmerich, and I've watched that. Yes, I did. I sat down and watched it.
Okay.
I need a new girlfriend. I really do. So I did watch it. I did watch it. But what's interesting about the first film in particular, the second film is interesting for a different reason. We probably don't have time to go into that. But the first film is about an alien invasion, about hostile extraterrestrials who come down to Earth and basically try to destroy it, and then some brave humans fight back through some in a very very unbelievably and very badly concocted plot.
Yeah.
They managed to defeat the aliens, but it's interesting because you find this is a post Cold War alien invasion movie, and you find of course in those days it was the conflict was basically about the Gulf and things like that.
Yeah.
There's a very interesting shot. I mean, because you see most of it's centered on the United States, but there's a couple of scenes with other countries, and you see, for instance, the Israelis and Israel and Iraq, carrying out a joint mission, and you actually see the two aircraft on the runway, one with the Israeli flag on its tail, one with the Iraqi flag on its tail, and you see them fighting together. Now, this is just after basically Iraq had been firing missiles at Israel. And Israel was developing nuclear weapons, which Iraq said were a threat to it. So in a sense, you have this message of universal brotherhood coming together to fight an external threat, which in reality is probably a realistic scenario. The question is, I mean, there's when it comes to one world coming together, universal brotherhood and things like this, that has a positive and a negative connotation. On the positive side, you can say, yeah, it's great that we all get along now, things like that. But on the other hand, it could be interpreted in a completely different way. It could be interpreted as the creation of a single world state, of which all nation states would no longer exist and would be subordinate to much larger, firstly continental power blocks, and then a one world government, maybe evolving from the United Nations. And this has been the general trend in politics for over a century towards greater internationalism, greater authoritarianism. And we've seen this, I mean, the world wars in particular, World War I, World War II, these in particular were instrumental in creating that kind of...
came out of that, didn't it?
Yeah, that kind of geopolitics.
Yeah,
of course.
After the Great War of 1914 to 18, which devastated Europe and completely redrew the map of Europe, everyone said, look, we need something, and then they set up the League of Nations, and which everyone thought was great. And now we have a talking shop, so this horrific tragedy, this war to end all wars, can never happen again. Because people by the end of it just wanted it to end. They just wanted it out. They wanted it out. Yeah. They had things like the Brest-Litovsk Treaty, which basically got Russia out of the war, and basically the Russians were just consigning. They were just basically saying they were just making massive concessions to Germany, just say, we just want to end, just take what you need, we just want out of this. So everyone just wanted it to end. So they created this League of Nations, which was an embryonic world government. And this then evolved into the United Nations after the Second World War, which was, in military terms, it was less devastating than the first one, but it involved massive civilian casualties as well, including the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and things like that, and the destruction of Germany and things like that. And people just said, "Look, great, we've got a United Nations. It's coming on a bit further because like many more countries joined the United Nations than joined the world the League of Nations." And at the same time, of course, in the early 20th century, the plan was first hatched for a united Europe, to have it, so that Europe would become a federation of nations rather than independent states. They'd be a federation of united states, exactly like the North America. You see the United States of America. And this, what you'll find is with policies that the government wanted. If the government want to bring in a policy they know is going to be popular, they do it openly. They say, great, we'll bow to the will of the people, we'll give you what they want, and they say, great, yes, thank you. If they want to bring in a policy that is unpopular, they know is going to be unpopular, they don't say, okay, we're going to bow to the will of the people and not do it. They do, instead they just bring it in slowly and stealthily. I mean, there's many examples I can give you. The privatisation of the National Health Service, for instance, is something I actually witnessed. I mean, that I think might have been an evolution of my conspiratorial, because I saw this going on, and I knew it was what I knew with privatisation of the NHS. It's not what the people wanted. The people love the NHS. They love having a publicly funded health system, which is free at the point of delivery. But then I saw that was being dismantled, and then I'm going on a bit of a tangent now, but
Yeah,
it's
fine,
all
no,
it's all relevant, yeah.
It is
Very
all
much so,
relevant,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
And then I see what happened was in 1997 we had a new government. The Conservatives were voted out, and we had Tony Blair's Labour Party, and I voted for him. I'm not proud of myself, you know, and because everyone thought, well, it's going to be different now because this was the opposition that had been. This was the opposition, and they'd been saying they were against all the government NHS policies, and they were going to change things. What happened was when Labour got into power, they didn't only continue with the original privatisation policies; they accelerated them. In places like, because people think of Margaret Thatcher and they say that was basically, she was the one who wanted the end of the NHS. But Blair went into areas that Thatcher never dared. You know, private finance initiatives and things like that. Thatcher would never do that. And this is where and this is culminated in this awful situation after Carillion now, which is basically is now a network of these various companies that are now collapsing, and they want to get bailed out. But another example is the European Union, because that was totally the idea that you would have a United States of Europe has always been very unpopular with most people, especially in Britain. So they've done it slowly. They started with the Treaty of Brussels in 1946, which was just basically it's like a smaller version of NATO, really. It was nothing particularly, but this led to more and more treaties over the following years, and it eventually led to the creation of the European Economic Community in 1970, which Britain joined. They had a referendum afterwards, which people agreed to do it because they just said, "Oh, it's just a trading bloc. It's not a federation. It's not a political federation." But some people, like Tony Benn, for example, who sadly passed away, he was one of the few people who had the brains to see forward and say, "No, this is going to end up with the United States of Europe." And he used that term. And of course he was right, because then we ended up with the European Union, which is exactly that. It is a superstate through which the nation-state system is being broken down. I mean, the nation-state system is something which has functioned perfectly well before then. I personally am not a nationalist. However, I do understand the value of the nation-state system has been very, very, in geopolitical terms, it's been a very stable, very functional scenario, layout, which has worked on every continent for centuries, since we evolved into a civilized society from early tribal societies. But now it's being dismantled for the first in the 20th century. Now in the 21st century, it's being dismantled for the first time ever and replaced by these continental superblocks. It's not just the EU, you see, because like there's the Organisation of African Unity, which is the second most advanced of these superblocks, which is basically where the various states within Africa. Africa has the most number of nation states of any continent, and these are being drawn together. Sometimes under the guise of independence, like with Eritrea. Sometimes it's fake independence, which is why I was suspicious about the Scottish independence thing. This is going to evolve into the African Union. There's the North American Free Trade Agreement. Sounds very benign, doesn't it? But it's Orwellian language. It's actually as an embryonic North American Union, and they've even got a currency, the Amero, which is the equivalent of the euro. And there's equivalent in every part of the world. They have these equivalents, and the end result is to unite these these continental blocks under a single world government. As George Orwell pointed out in 1984, the scenario there were no nation state systems left. Britain was simply called Airstrip 1, which was part of Oceania, which was a superbloc which included all of North America and Australia. And then there was Eurasia, which included the continent of Europe and most of Asia. And then there was East Asia, which included what's now part of the Far East. And if you remember, they were continuously at war. And very often the alliances would switch seamlessly, and no one would even notice. They would form an alliance with Eurasia and start fighting East Asia, and the news story would go out, well, Oceania has always been at war with East Asia, and Eurasia are our allies, even though a week before that Eurasia were firing rockets at London. These steamers, which were obviously like V2 rockets, at London. So that's what Orwell predicted, and so the one world government doesn't. It's not like it's not simply just a singular one world state. It wields its power through these various continental super blocks, which will end up probably being set at war with each other. I mean, there's good news, like with things that there's signs that all's not well. There is a snafu in the engine room, I believe. Brexit, I think, is a good sign that the plans are breaking down. And I've heard people say, "Oh, it's just another layer of the conspiracy." Can't you see that, Ben? Can't you see that they're just being more and more crafty? And I've looked at it, and honestly, I don't see how this is in any way controlled. I think it is something that's generally gone wrong with the agenda, and so that's a good sign. It's a good sign, because I mean, I don't want to be doom and gloom. You know, I don't want to be. I'm not a doom and gloom person. I know people who are, and it's awful because we've had listeners to the. When I started in radio, I did critical mass radio, and one of the listeners committed suicide, and I felt awful. I mean, because I try to keep an optimistic tone, but I mean, it's very easy because when you realise this fact, it's incredibly disturbing. When you realise that these awful things are going on. I mean, some of the things I deal with are very quirky and they're very interesting. Things like the UFOs, and they're quite fun almost, and the paranormal stuff I look into. Others are really dark.
There's a lot of elements, isn't there? But you have to go into all of it. You can't shy away from it, can you? Really, else you lie to yourself, then, aren't you? You can't just say, "Well, we'll tell you this bit, but not this because it's a bit too upsetting or emotionally charged." But it needs to be known.
It needs to be known.
There's I mean, the actual consequences, for instance, of the truth embargo on UFOs is basically we're living in a world where there's a lot of suffering and damage and pathology that really is unnecessary. I mean, there's no need for anyone to be poor. If you have if there is a free energy, which is infinite, and very cheap or free, and safe and clean, there's no need for anyone to be poor. The only reason people are poor is because they can't afford these things, because you have to pay for fossil fuels. So half the people in the world don't even use electricity because it's too expensive. And those who do use it can't always afford their bills. Even in this country, you get old people who die of cold in the winter because they can't afford it. There's no need for anyone to be poor in this world. But people are, and people before they die old and alone without dignity, or they die young of some preventable disease because they don't have drinking water. When there's all the drinking water in the world you need, you get it from the sea. With free energy, you can turn it into fresh water. I cover this in my books. The book ends with, I don't want to give a spoiler, but the book ends with the creation of an irrigation project in a drought-ridden part of Africa, which is using this free energy.
So you create almost a solution. With it, which is that's what we need, isn't it? We need our ideas towards solutions at least. You know?
There's no need for any environmental damage. I mean, environmental damage is. This is like the use of fossil fuels is incredibly destructive to the environment.
It is.
And I mean, this is known in mainstream, but they talk about carbon dioxide. Now, I personally don't think that carbon dioxide is dangerous. This is another conspiracy behind that.
The climate change thing.
The climate change is actually well, I could talk a little bit about that as well in a minute, but I mean the use of fossil fuels is still incredibly destructive. It releases toxic chemicals into the environment, in the air, into the water, into the soil, into people's bodies. In order to generate it, you need to tear up huge areas of countryside. You need to put wires all over the place on pylons, which do damage to create cancer clusters. You need to basically you have to get guys to go down underground and dig up the coal. Mining has always been and still is one of the most dangerous and unhealthy professions you could have. And to this day, miners, their average life expectancy is like, I don't know what it is, but it's way lower than what we have. If they don't get killed in accidents, they develop diseases because of exposure to coal dust. And none of it's necessary. It could all be preventable. It's all preventable.
And this is what's so frustrating, isn't it? About you look into this.
That's dark.
Yeah.
That's disturbing when you realise that, and you realise how deep this is, and you realise how it's like there's times when I really feel the gradient of this hill we're climbing, and it seems like how can we get to the top?
Yeah.
And I was very depressed actually just before Christmas, and I was just thinking, I made a video called "Is There Any Hope?" And if you watch it now, you can actually see. I feel a bit better now, but I was going through a really bad patch.
You do sometimes. You can overthink on certain aspects, and it can be quite damaging, really.
Yeah.
And then you find out that there are massive numbers of children being abused.
Yeah.
Institutionally.
Yes.
Through
there's something we want to cover as well, because it needs to be known. It needs to be brought out to the surface. I mean, what's in the mainstream is it's not. It don't go anywhere near the level of what it really is.
There's some of it's been released, but only there's only a tiny fraction of what actually exists.
Yeah.
The truth is far deeper. I mean,
Yeah.
for example, most people think that Jimmy Savile was just he was a horrible abuser, but well, it's not the BBC that did this. It's just they happened to employ a man who was horrible, and he managed to get away with it. He got away with abusing children in BBC care on BBC premises, in massive number of them.
Yeah.
And he did it for 46 years, which was his career. He was starting on day one. And they say, but the BBC's response is, we had no idea.
Yeah.
And
he seemed to have been heavily protected.
Yeah. Oh yes.
And luckily, some people don't buy that. And it's inconceivable actually logically that he could have done this with a massive institution of collaboration.
Yeah.
And he's been obviously he's now been exposed. Rolf Harris has been thrown to the sharks. He's in jail.
Yeah.
But they're just small fry.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
and we see it as they're the main one. It's our mainstream.
Main characters. Yeah.
Well, let's focus on them. While the real perpetrators, they get away with it. Don't look there.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
the real source of this is the people who allow people like Savile and Rolf Harris to do what they do.
Yes.
Because in any proper organisation, this would never be allowed. This would never be tolerated.
No.
And these people would be exposed and jailed from the very start.
Yeah.
The very fact that doesn't happen is an indicator of this, and it's extremely upsetting to know that this is going on.
And in satanic levels as well. It's
There are these people are members of satanic ritual networks and things like that. That exists. There are too many witnesses of people within schools and things like that. This goes on. There's black magic, which is a real thing.
Yeah.
And they are using children to do it. And they're using children. I mean, it's not just in the BBC. Of course, in Westminster we have the paedophile scandal. Cyril Smith has now been outed as a paedophile long after he's dead.
Yeah.
Like Savile, he was rescued by the grave. He got away with his whole life. The fact of the matter is, the police had proof that he was involved. He was caught basically red-handed in 1983, but they were told to stand down, not go near it. Edward Heath is now being openly discussed that he was a child abuser. This is many years after David Icke himself published accusations against Heath.
Years before.
Years
before. Yeah.
And basically, no one took it seriously. No one's thanking him now for this.
No.
Same with Savile. He published stuff about Savile. No one's thanking him for this. Nobody is appreciating what he did. David Icke said, he accused a lot of people, and he said, "Well, sue me if it's not true. Let's take you to court."
Yeah.
And there's a lady called Kathy O'Brien in America, a friend of David's.
Yeah.
You may have read Transformation of America. She accuses a very large number of people, over 150 people, of the most horrific crimes. Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, George H.W. Bush, Dick Cheney, a very large number of people, including several people in the movie industry as well, Hollywood stars. We all know about some of the Hollywood stars that have been abused. But that's just, again, probably there's only a few of them. That's only a tiny little amount. I suspect that some of them are innocent. Actually, some of the people who've been accused as innocent are innocent just as a distraction.
Yeah, there's a big thing about Michael Jackson. Was he really? He seemed to be an easy target for them to have a distraction for, because he he was trying to, I don't know whether recapture his child or what. We don't know.
Yeah.
It's-
What I say, I don't think he was actually. I think Michael Jackson's probably not.
Mm.
There's several other people who've been accused. I think probably are not.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
But
yeah.
it's all just like a concession.
Yeah.
But it's been portrayed in a way in order to distract people from the truth.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's in several different ways. The way it's been portrayed in the media is to distract people from looking any further.
Yeah.
And it's again the stories like Cathy O'Brien's. I mean, the book is still in print. Both her books are still in print. She accuses people who have like David did, who have the means to shut that book down and to have her sued for libel, basically, and David. Not one of them has taken legal action.
No.
Not one of them will give her a day in court, and because they know it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
They know it's true.
That's
That's it. If someone's written a book accusing me of these crimes, I'd be absolutely desperate to
Exactly.
get that book
Yeah.
out of print,
Exactly.
and the person in court. I mean, how they can not. Ted Heath is the only person who's even responded to David's accusations. He's obviously mentally ill, but he's saying that this guy is abusing children in satanic rituals, and they've accused him of being a reptilian shapeshifter at an event in Burnham Beaches. And the reptilian, incidentally, the reptilian shapeshifting thing is something that not everyone goes along with. I take it seriously. That's a big subject. But, now but it's upsetting that's going on. I'm a father. I've got a child. Well, my daughter's 23. She's not a kid anymore. But I feel for those children.
Yeah.
And the fact there's a large number of them out there.
More than we know as
No.
well.
Exactly. Now some of them are being kept imprisoned. I mean,
even some of I've read even bred for that purposes.
Yeah.
They brought in bred.
Yeah.
It's horrendous, So they will think it's normality because that's the only way of life they know.
Yeah.
So they're not going to. They probably won't tell people because this is just normal life to them.
Yeah.
But it's horrendous.
Yeah.
it has to come out. I mean, it has to be real. When it does, you'll see people weeping in the streets. Because the scale of it
Yeah.
and the severity of it is so much worse than anything I've ever dared
Yeah.
talk about. It's like I remember Christine Keeler died a few
Yes.
weeks ago.
Yeah.
This was a lady who'd. Oh, that was interesting. The Profumo scandal.
Perfume, yeah.
Yes, that was. That was interesting. That was in the rock and roll summer of 1963. And she was. Of course, the scandal was that she was having an affair with Jack Profumo, who was the foreign secretary.
Yeah.
She was also having an affair with this guy who was at the Soviet embassy.
Yeah.
And she was a model. She was a model and a high society call girl. And she was sort of caught up in the middle of it, and she was pretty much an innocent party. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's they were all consenting adults,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the real scandal should have been what was really going on. Why is that not? Why was that not a scandal? You know what I'm saying? Oh, I'm just so that just flashed. Is it still working?
There might be some.
I think that's working.
Is it working?
Yep, still working.
Still. Oh, good,
Yep.
good. Oh, cool.
It might have been like a text
No
message come through. It was, because I got it on silent on.
It's understandable, why people get downhearted, and then it's just what depressed me a couple of weeks ago before Christmas was I was having to deal with like infighting at the same time within the truth movement, and there's an awful amount of that, and it's just it's petty beyond belief, and I'm just like thinking, what's the point? Why are you wasting time with very often quite trivial and not inconsequential differences when we've got a world to save basically from destruction, and we have an entire it's not just humans but it's all life on Earth from extinction. Can't we sort it out afterwards? Whatever it is, we can sort it out afterwards.
It'll probably be irrelevant anyway.
But I'm just
exactly.
I'm dealing with more than one. This is something I'm having to dealt with a lot in the last year or so, and it's from more than one angle, in different cases, and it's just it is sapping his morale. It's morale sapping. And I just, I mean, I'm getting involved basically because, because there is often like a just cause, because like in one case it involves Larry Warren, the UFO witness, who's a friend of mine, who's been falsely accused, and so I don't want to sort of say, well, I'm not having anything to do with it because we've got to stop, we've got to get disclosure or something like that. I think no, I've got to say something about this, but it's so involved, and it takes up so much time and energy, and the fact that so many people are willing to dedicate so much time and effort, who really hate him that much, that I just think to myself, you know, not only if everyone's going to behave like this, not only will we never have disclosure, we won't deserve it. And luckily, it's a shrinking minority of people now. The tide's turning, and it will soon be over. But I mean, God, it's been almost 2 years of soul-sapping effort and endeavour to deal with this. That's I don't regret getting involved with that, because I think it was a just cause. I think Larry doesn't deserve. Larry does need to be defended. He doesn't deserve that. And there's several others at the same time. I've had to deal with other examples on a smaller scale, and that is depressing. I know you guys are new to this scene, but you'll end up coming a cropper with this.
Yeah, we've discussed that as we go along with this, we're going to come up against a lot of angry people. We acknowledge that when we're preparing ourselves.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to be respectful still.
Yes.
That's the thing. Because I mean, I don't like fighting fire with fire. It needs to be like more respectful for each other. And then maybe they might think actually they're quite nice people. Maybe learn a bit more.
But from watching you're the same. I've noticed.
I try to keep it rational. I have when I'm sticking up for Larry. I've tried to stick to fact, and it's not easy because the people who Larry's enemies have made enemies of me too, because I've been defending Larry, and they've called me things I would never repeat on camera. And it's sad. I mean, sometimes it's like the infighting is inevitable over issues. For instance, Andrew got into conflict with the 9/11 Truth Movement because of his support for Dr. Judy Wood, which they were against, and he made a stand for that, which was the right thing to do. But a lot of the infighting is over much more trivial matters, over totally basically irrelevant, inconsequential matters. And so that's the majority of infighting is not even over anything that has any real purpose and has any its resolution doesn't really have any effect on the greater scheme of things. I fell out with somebody, one guy I've really been fond of and worked really hard with. We fell out just before Christmas because he objected to something I put in a video, which I made with him, which was really a technicality. Yet he went berserk at me, and I had to break contact with him. I didn't want to back down on this, because it would have been very to back down on that would have been caused me an awful lot of grief, a lot of extra work. A lot of, they would hamper a lot of the things I do. But I mean, I really just tried to calm him down and say, look, this is not, you are overreacting, grossly overreacting to this. Please stop it. And he wouldn't, so I had to break contact with him. It's very sad.
It is sad things like that happen, I mean, even if some people they won't believe one aspect of something, of course that's their option, but they don't need to be so aggressive.
But I sometimes think, as we discussed before, I think it's also some people's not ready for it consciously. Which we said, I believe that as well. I do believe that some people are not consciously ready to believe certain things. Maybe that's the case.
To go down certain routes.
Well, I do wonder when they behave like this, how seriously they take things. Because, I mean, there was a massive amount of infighting over at David Icke a number of years ago, because the community of people who supported him on his forum, which I was a part, basically split in two, and there were a large number of trolls emerged out of this. And I've had to deal with them for like 5 years or so. I think I managed to, the one was basically after me for 5 years. I think it was more than one of them. There was like a whole group of them that were actually specifically targeting me for abuse and for slander, and I had to call the police at one point because this guy was accusing me of all kinds of things, and I had to call the police because I'm self-employed. It's the sort of thing that can get back to my clients.
Yeah.
And my daughter's at college. It's the sort of thing that could get back to her tutors.
Yeah.
As a father, she might be implicated. So I had to call the police.
Mhm.
But I mean, that's it turned out that a lot of them said, one of them made a statement saying, well, I never really believed in all the things that David Icke was saying. It was just a laugh. It was just a big laugh. None of it's true, he said. The stuff that David talked about. I just got involved because it was funny. And this was a guy who used to talk seriously about it. And I think to myself, well, that explains how they can become trolls.
Yeah.
Because they never really believe any of it anyway. They just pretend to, and it's just kind of game to them. But it's not a game. It's absolutely deadly serious.
Exactly,
These things are real. Not everything, but most of what David talks about is real. I don't believe the moon's a spaceship. I mean, that's something I disagree with David on. But most of it is real, and it is the most serious thing in the entire world. This is these issues, UFOs, the various conspiracies, false flag terrorism, the abuse of children. These things are real, and they are the most important issues affecting the world today. And it is a necessity. If this Earth and humanity has a future, then it has a future with these secrets unveiled. Because if it doesn't, we don't have a future. We won't survive. Within our lifetimes, it'll all be over. We'll be gone. We'll be in a global totalitarian state. Which natural humans won't even exist. Will be transhumanized.
Yes.
And there'll only be a handful of us, and we'll be
This is
transhumanized.
what we've got to keep in mind, isn't it? It's what we've got to keep in mind.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
It's a serious message. It's
Absolutely.
a massively serious message. You know, I mean, we sometimes put comedy in it, but not of
you
the
have
subjects. Not about the
You
subject. We know
No.
seriously.
No.
We do, but we do separate almost comedy stuff, just so we can bring in people who will find it funny, then look at other stuff, try and bring in that avenue.
Yeah.
You know, because otherwise, not a lot of people will come into it straight as what we're trying to put the message out.
I do comedy too, and
Yeah,
it's very
and
much.
just, you have to.
I
have
do
to.
because it would just destroy me if I didn't see the lighter side of it all. I have to. It's almost a survival mechanism. It's like doctors at my hospital. They have a very sick sense of humour, extremely ghoulish, and an outsider would think it was would get very upset and very offended by some of the things doctors say. But it's the only way they could do the job, and this is the only way I can do this is by having a laugh about it occasionally, because I mean it's something I've dedicated my life to. It's deadly serious. It's absolutely 100% real, and I won't tolerate people who treat it as just a game.
Yes, exactly.
I will tolerate them if they just keep it to themselves and be nice about it. But if they start abusing people and being aggressive and trying to hamper what other people are doing, then they need to be challenged. This is one other reason why I will get involved in infighting sometimes, because that's only for the reason to stop it, just to stop it.
Yeah.
With Larry Warren, it's something I do because firstly, I like Larry. I think he doesn't, he's someone I want to defend. But also because what these people are doing to him, basically everyone has to stop doing ufology to deal with this. Do you know what I mean?
Shouldn't be like that, should it? At all?
So the people who this hate cult actually say we want to expose frauds for the sake of ufology. Well, they're vandals. They're vandalising ufology. And they're doing it with gay abandon, and they don't care. Yeah.
I mean, Andrew warns us about it, doesn't he? He says, the more you go into, you just, watch out, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we're aware of it. We know the more we go into this, and the more we get deeper into it, involved in it, that we will come across this. We know.
It will inevitably, inevitably, and it's easy to get paranoid, and I try to avoid that. I mean,
You've got to be a bit thick-skinned.
I try to avoid, jumping to conclusions. If I think somebody might be, for instance, spreading disinformation, I will say so.
Yeah.
I'll say this person, this is wrong, and I'll say why.
Yeah.
But I mean, I won't accuse an individual without evidence. I'll not denounce an individual without evidence.
Yeah.
Now, Richard D. Hall has done an excellent job exposing what I think are real disinformation agents and what they do. But sometimes I think he's a bit overzealous, and he will sometimes suggest that some people are compromised when I think he's got no grounds for that. And I'd advise Richard, and I have done, not to actually publicise that part of the message. By all means, challenge the information, but when it comes to denouncing individuals, you have to, it's a very serious matter, and you need you do need proper evidence for it.
It's personal, almost,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, like with Nick Pope. I mean, I really didn't. It's only recently that real evidence has come to light to say that Nick Pope is actively distorting the message. Before that, you could say, well, he is like a debilitating influence. He has said some things which I think are very, very regressive in the ufological world. But I mean, I can counter that information without saying, well, Nick Pope, you're a shill. You know, and I've met Nick. I've talked to him. I got on well with him. You know, I got on okay with him. I talked to Nick, and I've had a drink with Nick. I've met him and spoken to him in a pub, you know. And I'd happily do that again. But I will have to say that there's what he's been doing recently, does lead me to think that it can no longer simply be something that happened accidental. I think he knows that he's putting things out that are wrong, and if he's doing that, then why?
Yeah.
You know, he is actively and knowingly, I think, trying to derail certain areas of investigation, and so I'll say that openly.
I mean, that's another thing to be aware that some people could be compromised with what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, that does happen. You know.
Yeah.
There are a large number of people who well, firstly, I think they're going down the wrong path. I'll put them straight. You know. There are some people I suspect of being in some way working for the other side. And I won't say who I think those people are unless I have evidence. But if you see me writing a lot of articles about somebody, about where somebody's gone wrong, and I do it quite a lot, you'll probably give you a clue who I think those people are. You know. But I mean, there was a lot of fuss. I remember there was like I got in an argument with somebody because. Again, I stuck up for somebody else. This is exactly like with Larry Warren. It's someone called Danielle Verite. Someone wrote a massive long tirade about her being an agent. She was an undercover operative. She'd been sent in by the Frankfurt School, which is one of these psychological warfare organisations. She'd been sent in to destroy the truth movement. And I looked at their evidence, and they had none. And then I looked at a bit of the background, and this always happens. I found out that they'd had a personal falling out, a purely personal dispute, shortly before they start. You see the same thing with Larry Warren. They start with a personal dispute, and then suddenly this person starts writing stuff about him being a shill and being a fraud. So I wrote an article saying this, and the person who'd written the original article against Danielle went absolutely ape at me and called me all kinds of names and stuff like that. And of course, you can't get into a discussion with people like that. I don't enter a discussion with people who can't talk on a logical level. I won't. I mean, all you could do is hurl abuse back at them. That's all you can do. I don't. I just block them. I don't have time for that. I just block them.
I think that's what Andrew do if he's having a kind of confrontation with someone. If they start getting aggressive, he'll go right.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's the only way. You know.
It is. It is the only way to deal with some people.
And they'll say, "Oh, you're only blocking." Some people say you're only blocking because you haven't got an answer, but it's not that at all.
No.
It's if they're showing aggression and then
it's taking your
when
energy.
they're not actually having a logical argument with you with it, and it becomes personal. It's the only thing you can do. You know.
The people who run these truth mobs, as I call them, always do this. They'll call you all kinds of rude names, and they'll say all kinds of horrible things about you. And when you block them, just so you don't have to read it, they'll say, "There you are. I see. I proved him wrong. He doesn't have an answer."
And it's not the reason at all, is it?
You know. And the problem is, like, it's just a lot of the freedom has to come. If we're going to be free and we're going to live in a free world, we have to be able to handle that. And to be able to handle that, we have to be able to operate on a logical level. We have to have a respect for rationality. And there's so many people that don't. People within the conspiratorial field, not just the mainstream. It's like the conspiracy theory community or UFO conspiracy paranormal community. Is as bad as the mainstream with that. They have as many, or almost as many people who reject logical process. And replace it with just with violence, rhetoric, and just just pure force, which is awful. I mean, I know a lot of people who take the sides of these truth mobbers just for a quiet life, just so they get left alone. And I said to myself, well, look, what chance do you have against the truth embargo? If you're browbeaten in submission by these this person these are usually not very impressive people.
Yeah.
They're basically keyboard warriors who basically sit in their basement and oh, I'm going to call you this, I'm going to call you that. They're not a very, very intimidating adversary. So I say to them, just don't let them shut you up. Because you're going to face something. You're going to face much worse when all this comes out.
I know on Miles Power. Is it Miles Power?
Yeah, I know. Miles Power.
I've read something like that, and I got into a debate with this skeptic, Moon Eyes, he was called, But we had quite a good debate because he was being quite respectful, and I was back. So we had this huge paragraphs, and because he was saying something like how usually, he says, when I talk with truthers, he says every argument, he says, I tell them this and that, and then they go, and I didn't. Right.
But it was respectful.
And it was him that went, but he was like, I had the last word.
But if you just get someone to engage with you on a rational level, it's like a breath of fresh air.
It is. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
I'll happily talk to people who completely disagree with everything I say, who just will remain logical and remain respectful. And it's so rare.
Yeah.
I mean, Miles. You see, I got into debates with Miles Power himself, and he's actually not a bad. He's not bad actually. He's all right, and I actually got on okay with him because we got.
He was a skeptic,
But I challenged him what he said about Dr. Judy Wood's book. Because he did he was going to do like a 6-part expose of Dr. Judy Wood. He only ended up doing 2 parts. But I got into like a quite friendly discussion with him.
I mean, I don't mind that the skeptics arguing with you if they're going to be respectful. That's fine,
I've just done a big video about skeptics actually. I just put up it's a long one actually. It's over 4 hours. It's only one I uploaded. So it's 4.5 hours long. I thought, how on earth did it get that long? But it did. And okay, so basically I've got a website, and the website is Hospital Porters Against the New World Order, as I said.
We'll put the link on as well.
Oh, cool. Yes, we will.
Yes.
hpanwo.blogspot.co.uk. Now the main site. Now I've got a main site where I put up very long articles. I haven't actually put up anything about a year and a half there because I haven't had time. But I did an article like about sometime in 2015 called Messiah, and that was the last one I did. So if you go onto that particular site, you might think it's not a very active website.
Right.
But that's actually just the main site. It's really a portal as well now. It just functions mostly as a portal to my other sites, which are much more active. In fact, my Hapanwo Voice news site I update almost every day. And I do Hapanwo Radio. Now there's new entries on there almost every other day because I'm doing my weekly Hapanwo show. I'm doing Third Rail Radio, and things like that. So there's all massive amount on there. And I do Hapanwo TV videos on YouTube whenever I can as well. So you can get the link there. And there's a forum, the Hapanwo forum, which is now I managed to get the trolls off it. But only it's really sad because I had to basically I had to end the anonymity, which is a shame because I want people to post anonymously and I can't anymore. Because the trolls will sneak back in. So I basically now, unfortunately, if anyone who wants to join the Hapanwo forum now has to identify themselves, which is very sad. I'm sorry about that. There's no other way to do it. But the trolls it's just got too much, and the other members were getting fed up with it, and I realised I'd sort of failed them, and so I had to do this. And so it's a necessary evil. And I've got the fiction blog, Ben's Bookcase, which is a fiction site. It's a fiction blog where I have actually got a lot of my material on there, including some short stories that I wrote. I wrote a short story called Ouija, which I'm very proud of, as Ouija board. And that's just available free on the website. I might adapt it into something longer at some point, maybe as a novella or something, which I'll publish as a book. But at the moment, just read the short story on the website. Now, my fiction, these 2 books I've already mentioned, Roswell Rising and Roswell Revealed. Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure, and Roswell Revealed, a world after disclosure. Now, these are my 2 books I've written recently in the last couple of years. Well, this one came out just a couple of months ago. This one, the sequel. That one came out last year. I'm writing another one now, so it's going to be a trilogy. But these are the fictional, allegorical books I've written about the New World Order, about conspiracies, about UFOs, about the paranormal. It's all in there in fictional, allegorical form, as I said, like George Orwell did. And I think hopefully I can get messages out there. The same message I'm basically distributing with my website, but it's telling it maybe in a way that will reach people in a way that just saying it outright well. Like I said, Orwell would have just been another conspiracy theorist if he hadn't written 1984.
Absolutely.
Now, before that, I mean, this is a book that came out in 2004.
Right.
It's called Rockall by Ben Emlyn Jones. There you are. And unfortunately, you can't actually buy this anymore. I've got a couple of copies left for my own amusement, but my own sort of like memorabilia.
Right.
But this book is no longer available. It's out of print.
Okay.
But there's a second edition which I wrote a few years after this was published. When I started the website, because I started the website at Panwo 2 years after I wrote this, and I've actually created a second edition, which you can read on Ben's bookcase for free.
Excellent.
And it's a lot better than the first edition actually, and it's completely free. This book is not available anymore. But this book is actually got a lot of my early ideas about conspiracies and UFOs and paranormal is actually in this book. Again, in fictional allegorical form.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of this actually. I worked hard on this, and I'm very proud of it.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Here's another book called Eben's Land.
It's quite a new one.
Now this is huge. There's 970 pages in this one.
Oh my goodness.
This is my first novel. It came out in 2002 as a book. Now this is actually not conspiratorial. I was kind of... It's funny reading it now, because it's a book I couldn't write now because I'm a completely different person. But I was sort of like getting into the conspiratorial side of things when I wrote this book, but it wasn't something I wanted to bring into this book. So this book it's basically a sort of satire of Welsh politics, really. But it's fictional allegory again. It's a story. It's a complete story. Now, if you want one of these, right, there are a few floating around online. Actually, you can buy them on eBay, but they're about 80 quid. I mean, they're really expensive now. However, I've got a few copies left, about a dozen, and so if anyone wants one, I'll sell them. These were originally £12.99 originally. I'll sell. They were £5 plus postage and packing from me. I just want to basically clear them out.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Okay.
if you want a copy of that, if you want a copy,
Yes, we'll put all the links on.
just let me know. My email address bennyj74@gmx.co.uk. There's a link to that on the website, all the websites, all my blogs.
Okay.
There's a link to that, so people can email me and I'll sell them a book. But quickly, because when they're gone, they're gone. I mean, literally, the dozen I have left at home are the only ones left in existence which haven't been sold.
Right.
So when they're gone, and you won't get them anywhere else. There's no second edition online. That's it. So it's your only chance. But
Yeah. So we'll definitely put things on YouTube then, on our YouTube
Yes,
channel,
we'll
and
put links and
also
everything,
thank
links
you.
as well.
Yes,
So yeah.
definitely.
it's been great talking to you guys. It really has.
Yeah,
You
we
as well.
enjoy being with you.
Thank you.
I mean, I could easily have carried this on.
We could.
I know. We could have gone
And
all
this is
night.
yeah, it is. Yeah, but I mean, we'd very much like to have another talk with you another time.
Yes,
because
by all
there's
means.
so much
much more.
You're welcome anytime. You're welcome anytime.
Oh,
And,
thank you very much.
we can sort out another time if you want.
Yes.
Because
Yes,
I know
please.
I know you've done more than one with Andrew. I know he lives closer. You know, I'm happy to do another talk with you anytime.
That'd be
Yeah.
fantastic.
We'll sort that out.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you very much.
And thank you
Thanks,
for
man.
taking the time as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Well, we've just come from Ben Emlyn Jones from his brother's house in Oxford. Just done a very interesting talk. All went very well. What do you think, Paul?
I think it went brilliantly. I think Ben was spot on with his words, and he basically said so many interesting things about 9/11. So many things. It was brilliant. Just amazing.
Yeah, I think we covered more subjects than we initially thought. You know, we went
UFOs.
we went into some quite deep, dark parts which we've not really dealt in any detail
Before,
yet,
yeah,
but we've
that's
obviously planned to. So I think our talk with Ben was almost like a taster of other subject matters that we will be addressing, you know, in
Definitely.
upcoming talks with various people, you know. So yeah, I thought it went really well.
Time flew, didn't it?
Yeah. We're just leaving Oxford, aren't we now? at the
Just leaving
moment?
Oxford now.
We're just leaving Oxford, and it's been a long day, but very enjoyable. We're going to just head home now, probably grab a kebab.
Yep.
And I hope you all enjoyed the talk. We'll plan to do another one with Ben, and of course plenty more with Andrew. There's so much scope we can get with Andrew. I mean,
And we're going to be seeing Dave Hodgering soon.
yes, we are, aren't we? We're going to see Dave
Yeah, let's see
Audrian
Audrian soon.
next month.
That's right.
That'll be another brilliant talk.
He'll be great as well. Yeah, definitely.
Hopefully Anthony Peake as well in March.
Enter roundabout.
Enter roundabout.
First exit.
We haven't got a woman in the car talking like a robot. It's actually the sat nav. In case you're wondering who that voice was. We'll call her Margaret. Sounds like a Margaret.
It sounds like a Margaret.
Yeah, I think it sounds like a Margaret. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed the
Drive
interview.
0.3
Do you mind?
miles, then
Margaret?
enter roundabout.
Okay, I'm filming here. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the talk that we did with Ben, and we shall see you soon.
Bye for now.